Today, more than 10,000 ambulance workers have voted to go on strike. They feel that a 4% pay award is just simply not keeping up with inflation. It's a real terms cut. Do you have sympathy with them?
Well, clearly we want to make sure that all workers, especially public sector workers that are doing really important work like ambulance workers, get a fair pay settlement, and that's why we've accepted the pay review work that's been done by the pay review body, who've looked at all of the different factors. And it is a challenge. Clearly it's a challenge because I can understand why people can see their prices going up and want their wages to match. We see people in the private sector that are equally as challenged and their wages aren't going up. But we've got to be realistic. We've got to make sure that, first of all, we can afford it in terms of the public sector, the money that's coming out of the Treasury. I think if you looked at the nurses' settlement, for example, it would equate to something like £9 billion on the NHS budget. That's got to come from somewhere. But also you risk stoking inflation as well.
At the same time, though, ambulance workers, that's an acutely stressful job. I mean, I can't imagine how difficult it is. We've seen the record waiting times. We've seen the stories about people being treated in ambulances outside hospitals because they can't get a bed. It's not too much to ask that their pay packet shouldn't be shrinking at this time.
No, these are difficult times. That's especially for ambulance workers because of those extra pressures that are on them at the moment in the NHS, and of course at this time of year anyway, regardless of picking up still from COVID. But no, I come back to the point, and it is difficult to think through when you are worrying about paying your bills and worrying about the cost of living and what you're seeing in all the newspapers and, of course, all the broadcasts and everything like that, pressures from everywhere across the world. But the problem is, if you start stoking inflation, then these pressures will last longer.
I thought inflation was supposed to be a global challenge. That's what you guys keep telling us. Now you're saying that actually it's all about how much nurses get paid.
No, it is because, well, look, if you think about the Bank of England, has one lever to tackle inflation, interest rates. So it puts interest rates up and down. And so basically, if inflation continues because there is more money coming into the economy, then the bank has one lever to pull, interest rates. So actually, by giving them more money now, what you're finding is their mortgage rates will carry on going up later. And so it is a real fine balance.
But it's unaffordable, that's what you're trying to say.
Effectively, overall, we've got to make something that is affordable, is proportionate, but is at least as fair as possible.
You've just been talking about the financial pressures, about what's affordable and what isn't. Is it affordable for the private schools to continue to be exempt from VAT?
Look, I think this is a really this is a debate that I can understand the politics around it. You saw Keir Starmer talking today about Winchester. Frankly, if you take VAT off private schools now without the thought about how you model behaviour change, you'll see a load of schools close. You'll see people taking their children out of independent schools. It won't be Winchester, Harrow, Eton, those kind of big elite schools that everybody always thinks about. It'll be the middle-of-the-road schools, especially prep schools, and those people will have to go into state education. So what you're doing now, whereas Keir Starmer, again, understandably for political reasons, says, well, we're subsidising them by 20%. Well, guess what? You'll be subsidising them by 100% if they actually move into the state sector.
I'll be honest, I am struggling to understand this argument fully, right? Because if you're a state school, you have to act within your budget all the time. Inflation has meant sudden changes to state school budgets as well, right? And so what do? They have 30 pupils in a class. They have to act as teaching assistants. They have to scrap music lessons. Surely the same would happen for private schools.
Yeah.
You would just cut your cloth. You'd make budget savings just like in the state sector.
So what you have, that's why I was talking about those middle-type schools, actually, because what you already have in the independent sector, in parts of the independent sector, when you get outside elite schools, they're already under pressure. A lot of businesses... Because
they have 30 kids in the class today?
Well, no, what you're finding is that a lot of prep schools, for example, they go up to 13. There is a dwindling market for schools in this country that go up to 13, and so they're all starting to pivot and change. And what you're finding is some schools are failing, some schools are closing already, some schools are being taken over. But I come back to the point that if you've got a school with relatively small roll numbers and then they start going back into the state system, not only do those businesses fail, because they are, as I say, businesses / charities, however you want to term them, then you have the state school, you're adding pressure into the state schools system. They want to then, they will need to build schools. Where are they going to find the land to build the schools? It'll be the old independent school sites that have just closed down. So you're effectively cross-funding in that way. So you're not going to get an immediate economic benefit.
I just want to have a look at a graph that I think shows some of the difference in per pupil funding. So whether it's fees charged in private schools or if it is the things that they get from the government, from the state sector. Now, this is a change in school funding per pupil. You can see the red line, of course, the state schools, the blue line is private schools. And according to the IFS, £6,500 more is spent per pupil in the private sector than the state sector. Are you really saying funding can't be, squeezed in the private sector if you look at this graph? It's quite hard.
What I'm saying is that there's unintended consequences. I'm not saying that you can't make any changes, because bearing in mind the VAT changes that you're talking about, my understanding, and I may get this wrong, but I think that although they get the 20% VAT, they're not allowed to claim back. So actually, if you remove that from them and they become a pure business rather than a charity, they will be able to claim their VAT back. So you're not going to get quite that gap closed that you think you're going to get. It's all about unintended consequences for me.
Now, I was hoping you might be able to clear something up for me on onshore wind. But to be completely honest, I'm finding it quite hard to keep up with what the government position is. We know, of course, Rishi Sunak wanted to continue with the effective ban on new onshore wind. He's now, of course, come under pressure from rebels, including Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. So what is the current position then? Well,
I mean, the current position is where the fact that you have to have community buy-in, you have community consent. There has been no change, but clearly this amendment's coming in. There's a lot of people that have. Some people have an overarching view that they want to see more onshore wind, but there are a number of people that have signed that amendment that have constituency issues in particular. And, we're in the middle of a process as ever, whereas, the government will be listening and we'll be talking to those people to see where we can land it.
What's your own view? Because, Grant Shapps is sat here saying it's an eyesore, then you get other Conservative MPs who say, look, this is a really cheap way of getting green energy. What's your view?
Well, I can see both sides, because there's not a lot called for onshore wind turbines in Sutton and Cheam, so I've not had that direct responsibility in my part of South West London as a constituency MP, to be fair. But if you look at, and I can understand the appeal, but I can also understand the difficulty of living with one of those, or the prospect of having an onshore wind turbine. It's important, however we do it, that we take people with us. We're doing great things with offshore wind. I actually gave planning permission, the last things I did as business minister, for Sizewell C, and so I noticed that the government has given the go-ahead for that. It's getting the mix right. That's the key thing.
And now there's another story that I wanted to ask you about while I've got you. Prince William's godmother resigned after asking Ngozi Fulani where she really came from at a reception at Buckingham Palace. And when Miss Fulani said that she was British, Lady Susan Hussey said, I can see I'm going to have a challenge getting you to say where you're from. She has stood aside from her job as a result of that. Is it an example of racism?
I think there's a lot of casual racism. I say that as someone who's half Burmese, that, there's often this kind of idea that people say, yeah, but where are you really from? That's takes a bit of... Unfortunately, we're still having to educate people.
So you think it is an example of casual racism?
Well, I think there is this casual sort of approach sometimes, which you have to be careful, because, I'm all for free speech, but why on earth would you want to offend someone like that way?
And you can understand why she was offended by it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, definitely.
Yeah, as I say, when I was growing up, I was, I don't consider myself particularly dark, but I had a slightly darker skin than some of my friends, and they knew my Burmese background, and there's a lot of casual racism in that. You see.
Was that at school that you?
Yeah. And then some of that stuff tends to get written off as but it's just banter. And then this instance, it's the first time I've heard about this example that you put in front of me. But as I say, from everything you've just said, it just sounds like it can easily be swept away as just a casual conversation. But I was just interested, not really appropriate.
Tell me to go away if you want, but if you wanted to talk a bit about what happened at school, then
there's just for me it was name calling. It was children really, I think, exploring their boundaries. I didn't have a bad time. No. Crikey, there's no way I would ever describe myself as having a discriminatory childhood. But it was name calling. It was sort of banter, when actually, if I wanted to kick back, and I did every now and again, people realised. So I'm very lucky in in that regard.
But you can, as you say, from your own experiences, but also just looking at the world around you, you can understand how someone would react to what, as you say, is casual racism.
Yeah, because look, I think I'm really proud of my Burmese heritage, which is why I do talk about it a lot, and I'm sure, this lady that is proud of hers, and it's important that you don't counter that. But on the other hand, and I'm glad people are interested in people's heritage. But there's ways and means. And
that's not what she was saying.
Yeah, exactly. There's ways and means about going about inquiring, shall we say.
Thank you very much for being on the show. It's been really interesting to talk to you today.
Pleasure.